Yeah, when I signed up or something, they like got me now. So that was nice because you've seen a lot of these people for years, but I mean to get invited to something like that, that's like that was a big time for bringing.
Yeah. All right. Ready to roll. Hello, Gary. Hello, Mayor. Hello, Mo. Okay, so we're middle of the mimer. First of all, it's a great day today. With everything that's going on, it's a very special day. It's the Rebbe's birthday. So it's an extra important time to learn Chassidus, especially to learn the Rebbe's Chassidus. And like that, we connect to the Rebbe. And we definitely hope and pray is that the special day will, as we're all hoping for, bring an end to all these things. And not just an end to this coronavirus, but actually an end to the entire exile, entire Golos, and bring us all to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Yisrael. People have pointed out it's a fascinating thing that this corona actually means keser, means crown. So let's go from the crown of the corona to the crown of Mashiach, from one crown to the next. So Pesach is also coming up. It's also an opportune time for that. So that's our prayer and our hope.
Amen.
Mayor, you're muted. Let me unmute you here. What were you saying, Mayor?
It's also called COVID. COVID-19.
There you go.
Oh,
all right.
Chaim's connecting.
Here we go. Okay. All right. So what do we have? We're learning the Maimer Venacha Alav, talking about Mashiach, and particularly two things about Mashiach. Number one, how Mashiach is going to be a king, and number two, how Mashiach is going to be a teacher. The first half of the Maimer, which we learned at length, is Mashiach as a king, and it's all based on the question: why do we need Mashiach to be a king if everybody's going to recognize Hashem at that point? If the whole world is going to be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, then what do you need a king for? And what we said was that a king brings down he's head and shoulders above the people, meaning he's completely greater than the people. And therefore, and also the way he commands things is in a way of a decree, which is from top bottom. He doesn't engage with the people. He just decrees it and they have to follow. And what he says the Mashiach is going to do to accomplish the same thing. He's going to draw down things which are way beyond that we can experience, godliness way beyond us. And by that, what he's going to do is he's going to give us a transcendent experience of Hashem, which is beyond our reasoning, beyond our feelings, beyond our emotions, beyond our everything, including beyond even seeing godliness, which is the highest level of intellect. He's going to give us something which is beyond that. He's going to give us a transcendent experience of Hashem. How do we prepare for that? Because in exiles, when we prepare for everything, is what the Maimer says, that when in exile, we prepare for what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. So you prepare for that for something called Netzach, that victory in ourselves. The fact that no matter what, we continue to keep Yiddishkeit, Mesiras Nefesh, he says, that we sacrifice everything in order to do what Hashem wants. Or as he put it, is that there's no other option. Our Judaism, we keep we don't deviate an iota. Why? Because there's no other option. And this is how we prepare for this revelation of Mashiach, because of the Netzach, our victory, our Mesiras Nefesh comes from it's rooted in the essence of our soul. And then being that me and you in exile, we serve Hashem, which is in a way which is beyond reason, beyond intellect. We serve Hashem stubbornly. Even when we not understand it, we're not motivated, we still do it. But that leads us, that brings us to Mashiach comes, he'll also give us a level of godliness which is beyond our reason, beyond our understanding. That was the first half of the Maimer. And the second half, he talks about how Mashiach is also a teacher. And a teacher has a whole different purpose. A teacher does not want to give a transcendent experience to the student, Because if he does that, he's not doing his job. The job of a teacher is that the student should understand what the teacher is saying. The teacher has to lower himself and the ideas that he's teaching in order that the child should be able to understand it. If the child doesn't understand it, if he can't relate to it, then he's not doing his job. So if a teacher says, this is the way it is, and who cares if you understand it or not? That's not a teacher. That's not the way to teach. And so therefore, when Mashiach is a teacher, he also, not only is he going to give us a transcendent level of godliness, he's also going to enhance our understanding of Hashem, our seeing of Hashem, as he's going to explain. But how do we merit that? Also through what happens in exile. But now comes the question: if we can't see Hashem and we can't understand Hashem the way we understood him in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, then how is it possible that in the time of exile we prepare for this higher level of godliness? If we have to prepare for godliness, for the coming of Mashiach, right? Through what we're going to experience. So we're going to experience a higher level of intellect, a higher level of understanding. But in exile, we don't have that level of understanding. And if we don't have that level of understanding, then how is it that today we are preparing for Mashiach's times? How is it that by the very little we understand today, we're preparing for Mashiach's times? And that's what the Maimer is going to explain and highlight in this next part. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Actually, one more thing before we share the screen. How is he going to explain this? So he explains like this, that our coming down into exile is what he calls as a Yerida Tzarich Aliyah. We go down in order to go up even higher. Every time we go down, it's always in order to go up even higher. And the same thing would be, we go down into exile, it's in order to go higher. Where do we learn this from? We learn this from their neshama coming down into the world. Our souls, the way it was in heaven, was at a much greater, higher level than was before, than it is now. It was able to see godliness more, understand godliness more, experience godliness more. So the neshama, the way it was in heaven, the soul we was in heaven is much greater than it was now. So why does the soul come down to this world? Why does it come down into a body? Why does it come down to a physical body like mine and yours? So it says, because in order that it should go even higher than it was before. Through coming down into the body, the soul attains greater heights than before it came down. And the same thing he says is going down into exile. Going down to exile does the same thing. By us going down into exile, we go even higher and greater than we were before. So even though that the Beis Hamikdash had such a high revelation of godliness, it was an incredibly great time spiritually and everything, but by coming into exile, we're going to attain even greater heights than it was in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because Yerida Tzarich Aliyah, going down is in order to go up higher. Where did this all begin from, he says? And here's where the explanation of the Maimer really gets involved in explaining where's the source of this all. And he says the source of this all is the original Tzimtzum. Before the world was created, let me share my screen here. Share my screen. Okay, maybe hopefully you can see it. Draw. All right, before the world was created, Hashem filled the whole world. Then Hashem took his light, he removed it from where the world was going to be, and we made what's called a vacuum, an empty circle. The Igul HaGadol was called in Kabbalistic terminology, the great circle. Inside the circle was a vacuum, was empty, and outside Hashem withdrew all of his light outside the circle. And then what Hashem did is he drew a line right down the middle, a very thin line called the Kav, and that's where the creation is. So let me get my thing here. Okay, so you have the great circle, which is the light which is beyond everything, beyond creation. That's why it's actually a circle, because there's no beginning and there's no end. It's higher than everything. everything is equal to it because it's greater than everything. And in that, he created a line. Now, the closer you are to the edge of the line, the higher you are. And then the lower is where we would be, right? At the very, very bottom of that line is where the worlds would be, because the further you get away from the line, from the circle, the lower you are. So first again, Hashem filled everything. He removed his light, created this great circle, which inside that circle there was nothing, and then, or at least empty of his light, and then he drew that little line into that circle. This is what's called the original tzimtzum, the original contraction, the original hiding of Hashem's light. It wasn't just that Hashem diminished the light. It wasn't that he just made it less or concealed it or hid it or put it behind a curtain or many other ways that you can have a tzimtzum. He completely removed the light, and then he brought in just a little bit of the remaining light. And we spoke about it in past classes, like a teacher would do, etc. We're not going to get into all of it now. But the point that he brings out here is like this, is that this tzimtzum has a double effect. When Hashem removed his light, and then he brought in this little bit of light in the middle, had a double effect. Number one, it affected the light which is on the outside of that circle, and it also affected the light which came through the circle. Now, of course, it's understandable how it created that changed the light that came inside the circle, because before it was infinite, and now you have a finite little bit of light coming through. But how did it change the light outside the circle? For that, he says that the light itself doesn't change, because this light is beyond creation, and therefore the tzimtzum doesn't change the light itself. But what it did change is that it no longer shines. It's now hidden. One of the notes on the bottom there says it's like sleeping. When you go to sleep, right, your intellect is still there. Your emotions are all still there, and they're still, the only difference now is they're not out and working, they're inside yourself. They go back into their source, and therefore they're not functioning in the same way that they did. Does your intellect essentially change when you're sleeping? No. You have the same mind, the same brain, the same thought, the same everything, right? It's just, it's not functioning now. Why? Because it went back, it got drawn back into its source, into the soul. And the same thing is the light that used to be everywhere and now is behind that circle. So the light itself doesn't change, but Hashem withdrew that light, so now it doesn't shine anymore. So that's how the light changed. That's how the tzimtzum changed the light which is beyond the circle. And then the light which comes into the circle, it also changed. And in short, he says in 3 levels. Number one, he differentiated, he separated the finite from the infinite. So before, everything was infinite, and including the finite, so to speak, part of Hashem was also part of the infinity of Hashem. And what he had to do is he had to separate those two things. So that tzimtzum does the first thing, it separates the finite from the infinite. So now the finite is on its own. Number two, it makes it in the light, all of a sudden it has a form of its own, even though light by definition is simple, but it has the 10 sfirot. A great example of that is light, the physical light, is that even though light is just plain white, but we know that actually there's all these different colors in light. It's all the colors combined, and that's when you have a rainbow, it brings out the different colors of the light. So the same thing is that the light of Hashem, when it comes to the tzimtzum, number one, it becomes finite. Number two, it gets formed, it gets defined by 10 lights, which are all included in that simple light. And then it goes through the vessel, where then when it once comes into the vessel, it actually becomes, it becomes as the vessel. It becomes megushim, becomes, not physical wouldn't be the right word up there, but it becomes as physical or as non-simple as the vessel. So now all of a sudden it's like the light coming into the rainbow, where you can see the different colors of the light. That would almost be like the light coming into a vessel, where it comes like through a stained glass. You see a red light, a blue light, a green light, and so on. So that's how he explained so far how through the tzimtzum, both of these things happen. It changed again the light which is outside the circle, and it also changed the light which is inside the circle. Okay. Now, he brings that, and to explain how that also works with going into exile. Okay? How it works with our soul, and it works with going into exile. And what he says is like this. Our soul also has 2 things that happen with it when the soul comes into our bodies. Just like in this Tzimtzum Arishain, there are two things that happen. It's the change of light outside the circle and the change of the light inside the circle. The same thing is with our soul coming into the body. You have both of these changes as well. What are these two changes? Number one, me and you have parts of our soul, components of our soul, which are completely greater. It's much, much greater and higher than coming down into our bodies, and they never come down into our bodies. There's a part of my soul, there's a part of your soul that's right now, today, still in heaven, and it never came down into the body. As an example of this, okay? Let me give you an example. So it says that Daniel, the prophet Daniel, was once walking with his three friends, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, and all of a sudden, Daniel had a vision, a prophetic vision. And it says that his three people that were walking with him, the three people that were walking, they all of a sudden start shaking in fright. They start trembling in fright. And the Talmud asks, what were they shaking about? Daniel saw the vision. So why are these three people shaking? And the Gemara answers that even though they didn't see, but mazlayu chazi, even though they didn't see it, their mazel saw it. Because their mazel saw it, we call it mazel tov, their mazel saw it, that's why they started shaking. What's this mazel? What's mazel tov? When you say, what is the definition of mazel tov? What is mazel? So people say good luck. In Judaism, there's no such thing as luck, right? Everything is from Hashem. So what do we mean good luck? What do you mean mazel tov? It should be good mazel. So if you take the word mazel in Hebrew, mazel actually means to drip. Noizel. Noizel means to drip. But it's in the, I don't know how you say it in English in grammar, but mazel means the part, not that is dripping, but the source of the drip. It's where the dripping is from. That's what mazel would mean. From there we drip. What's this drip? So our soul, there's a part of our soul that's in heaven, and it drips into our soul that's in our body. In popular what do you call it, jargon, you might call it the subconscious. In Chassidus, one of the parts of the subconscious is what? Is that you have a part of your soul that's still in heaven. These three prophets who did not see the vision, the source of their soul saw this vision. And because the source of their soul, which is in heaven, saw this vision, it dripped into their bodies, and they started trembling in this world because they had a subconscious revelation of godliness that they didn't see. And they started trembling because of it. Each one of us has this. Each one of us has this mazel. So when you say mazel tov, what you're basically saying is that they should have a good drip. That in other words, they should have a something which is beyond the soul coming down and affecting the person. Another example of this is that it says in the Alter Rebbe writes in his Torah, he talks about how at times all of a sudden we get this thought, this inspiration of tshuva. All of a sudden we want to do tshuva, and we don't know where it came from. We weren't studying about anything. We weren't thinking about Hashem, but all of a sudden this genuine, not just a fleeting, a genuine feeling of tshuva just overcomes us. And the Alter Rebbe asks, where's this coming from? Why all of a sudden are you getting this feeling of tshuva? And what he says is, it's because a part, the soul in your, or go back a second. I'm sorry, let's go back a second. In Pirkei Avos, in different places, it says that there are baskos, there are echoes, there are voices that ring out in heaven, right? These voices that ring out in heaven. And Pirkei Avos has a couple of them. And the question that's asked is, what's the point of these echoes, of these sounds, of these voices in heaven? The ones who hear them, I imagine that they don't need the echo, right? If there's echo, the Pirkei Avos says, woe to those that don't study Torah, right? So this voice rings out in heaven, woe to those who don't study Torah. So I'm assuming the ones who hear that voice don't need the reminder. They're learning enough Torah that they don't need to hear the echo, right? And the ones that do need to hear it, I'm assuming don't hear it. So what's the point of it? What's the point of this voice ringing out in heaven when the ones that need it, it's like preaching to the choir, right? The ones who need to hear it can't hear it. The ones who don't need to hear it, hear it. So what's the point of it? So Chassidus says this idea, which the Alter Rebbe, is that all of a sudden you get this inspiration for tshuva. Where did it come from? It came from hearing one of those voices in heaven. So all of a sudden, your soul in heaven heard this voice, and it shakes you up. You have no idea where it came from because subconsciously you didn't hear anything. But your subconscious, your soul in heaven heard this voice, and it dripped. It dripped into your consciousness that what? That all of a sudden, oh, I have to do tshuva, I have to become better. You have no idea where it came from. You have no idea what it was, but it came because your soul in heaven heard this voice. They heard this baskal. So what do we get out of here? What we learn here is that there's a part of your soul, there's a part of my soul that right now is still in heaven experiencing angels and godliness and everything the way it was before the soul came into the body with no change whatsoever. It's still experiencing heaven the way it was. Right? And therefore only a part of our soul, and you might say even only a small part of our soul, comes down into our bodies. What we think, feel, what our conscious is only just a very small part of ourselves. And that's the part of the soul that comes down into the bodies. Now I think we could start understanding that what we said before about the two parts of God's light. The light that transcends the circle and the light that comes down in the circle. And we said that the tzimtzum changes both things. By us, it's the same way. We also have those two things. We have the part of the soul which is beyond, the part of the soul which never comes down into the body, and the tzimtzum, the change that happens when our soul comes down into the body is number one, that part of the soul doesn't come down. It remains in its source. It remains in heaven. It remains hidden, just like the light before the tzimtzum doesn't come down. It doesn't shine through the tzimtzum. So, excuse me. So the soul that transcends, the soul that's in heaven never changes. It itself doesn't change. But what does change is it no longer comes down into our consciousness. So it gets removed from our consciousness, even though that it is still there and still exists. So that's the first change that happens when our soul comes down into the body. And the second change that happens is that the soul that does come down into the body, not all that it changes according to the body, which means that now our consciousness is all filtered through our body, meaning our soul. What our soul in our body sees is no longer heavenly, is no longer godly, is no longer angels and spirituality and everything like that. What do our eyes see? Physical matter. What do our ears hear? Physical noise. What do our fingers touch? Physical stuff. Why? Because the soul changes according to the body. It's the soul comes down into the vessel, and now the soul's consciousness is changed, that all that it sees, experiences, and everything is only what is filtered through the body. There's a girl that lived in Kansas City. I don't know what's with her now. I can ask my mother, but anyway, she was in an accident. In a terrible accident, and thank God she survived. But after she started seeing things, she started seeing auras. Like she would see people, and she would see auras around them. As one example, she went to the Ohel. She went to the Rebbe's Ohel. She went to the Rebbe's in New York, the Rebbe's gravesite, and she came out and she was talking about different things that she'd seen, different lights. 12. I don't know exactly what it was. I remember the exact details. But one of the things that she saw there was she all of a sudden turned to another place. Says, "Isn't there somebody wholly buried right there?" Without anybody pointing out to her. And they said, "Yes, that's actually the Rebbe's mother. The Rebbe's mother is buried there." And she says, "Oh, I can tell." Just the aura. She just had this. Unfortunately, people started saying she was crazy. She was right, and she started thinking herself that maybe I'm crazy. And she spoke to my uncle, Rabbi Manas Friedman, and what he told her was actually what seems to have happened to you is that your shell was broken. Your body has been broken. So in other words, the filter that your body, your mind filters stuff out, it's been broken. So it's not filtering out things properly. So what ends up happening now is that these spiritual energies, the spiritual lights that exist, that are here, but nobody can see it because our eyes only filter physical matter and our ears only process physical and our brains only understand physical things. Your shell has been broken. And because your shell has been broken, these spiritual lights to a certain extent are seeping through those cracks in the shell. And all of a sudden you're able to see things which are beyond what regular people can see. In other words, That's because at the accident, it broke the body a little bit. But in the breaking of the body, it lost some of that filter, which goes to that same thing, is that these things that for most people are hidden and we can't see, it's only a subconscious. We can see it, we can only see it with the soul, and heaven can see it, but we can, right? By her, that was broken. So in other words, the filter was broken by her. Each one of us have that filter, meaning our soul still sees. Our soul still hears. Our soul still does all these things. But now our conscious self can no longer see what it originally saw, feel what it originally felt. Now it can only feel, see, understand, and comprehend that which, is filtered through the body. And that's also why, it's a side note. As a side note is, when somebody passes away, they don't go somewhere else. It's not like we're here on earth and then the soul goes to heaven, which is some millions of billions of light years away. No, earth is right here. Earth is right here. The difference between a soul on earth and the soul in heaven is what is being filtered into the soul's seeing, hearing, and feeling and understanding. Because our soul now is in a body, we could only see, feel, and comprehend physical matter, what's being processed by the physical body. Like, for instance, we know that there are much more light, that there are much more colors than there are in the spectrum. There's UV and all this kind of stuff, which I don't know that stuff, but whatever, right? There's many sounds that we can't hear, that other animals can hear. There's smells that other animals can hear. We know that already. And especially, and because our bodies only filter through even this coronavirus, right? We know it's there, we can't see it, right? Our eyes only filter through certain things, and especially spirituality. So therefore, when a soul's in the body filters all that stuff. When a soul, God forbid, after 120 years passes on, what happens? It doesn't go anywhere else. What just happened is that filter got removed. So now, instead of seeing computers, tables, people, and chairs, now it starts seeing angels, souls, and godly energy. Why? Not because it went somewhere else, but because the filter was changed. You change the channel, right? On the radio, you change the channel, you're getting a different signal, right? The same thing is that the channel was changed. No longer is being filtered through this channel, and all of a sudden you see something else. And then in heaven itself, there are levels upon levels. That's why you have a lower Garden of Eden, a higher level Garden of Eden, and there's different, because each one is like an onion which is layers and layers of reality. You peel off one layer, and there's another layer. Peel off another layer. Our reality is the same thing. We only see the physical reality, the outer layer. A soul goes to heaven, it means that you just peeled off a layer. And all of a sudden, instead of seeing the physical, the soul will now see the spiritual, and so on and so forth. So what do we got? What do we have out of all this discussion? This is what the Rebbe is going to explain in Vav. In Hey. Number one is the difference that happens in the soul when it comes down into the body. It gets changed in two ways. Number one, the soul that is higher than the body remains up there and doesn't come down. That's the first symptom. It doesn't change the subconscious of the soul, but what it does change is that that's no longer our conscious self. So it hides that from our conscious self. That's the first symptom. And the second symptom is that it changes the soul, which comes down into our body, to be filtered and channeled only through that which the body could comprehend, see, and feel. He's going to say at the second half of this paragraph that the same thing happens in the Beis Hamikdash and in exile. In the Beis Hamikdash, we had, number one, we saw Hashem, and we also comprehended Hashem in a much greater sense. And now when we come into exile, we have both of these things as well. We no longer see, which is like the light which is beyond the circle, which gets hidden completely, but it doesn't change. And the same thing, the soul, which is in the subconscious, which doesn't change but gets hidden from us. The same thing, seeing in godliness is completely removed from us. In exile, we don't see anything. And then the understanding that we have, the comprehension that we have, it comes through the tzimtzum that no longer do we comprehend the way it was in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. We comprehend in a much, much lower way. So over here, we still comprehend godliness, just like in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. But you can't compare the two because it goes through the tzimtzum, it goes through exile, and exile it's much, much lower. Any questions before we do it inside? What we just explained. We're good? All right. Hey, let's do this inside. Again, explaining the difference, the change that happens when our soul comes down into our body, and the change that happens when the Jewish people go into exile. The same thing happens. The same thing happens with when the soul gets hidden, when it comes down below into a body. Just like the two things we said by the tzimtzum, that number one, it hides the light which is beyond the tzimtzum, and number two is it changes the light which comes through the tzimtzum. The same thing happens with our neshama coming down into our body, our soul coming down into a body. What happens? And he says in a parenthesis, the reason for that is because any concealment is rooted in the original tzimtzum. So every tzimtzum, every time anything gets contracted and lowered and minimized, it is all sourced in the tzimtzum. So if you can compare it to the tzimtzum, they are related to the tzimtzum, and therefore the same thing in effect happens. They have two things that happen. Like the two things that happened in the original tzimtzum, the same thing happens with the tzimtzum of the soul coming down into the body. When the soul comes down to the body, the same two things happen. Number one is going to be, again, where part of the soul never comes down, just like the light of the circle, which never comes down into the tzimtzum. Aleph, that when the soul is above, all of its abilities shined in a revealed way. When it comes down below, it's concealed. This fact that the fact that the soul gets hidden is not because the body hides it. Rather, because these things stay above and they don't come down into a body. It's not that the body changes the light, that it hides it. Rather, it never comes down in the first place. And he gives the example here in this 46. He compares it to sleeping. Just like by sleeping, right? He says, it's not that the body hides your intellect. It's not that it hides your seeing. Those things get drawn back into your soul. And the same thing is that this part of the neshama stays above. B'dugmas, this is as an example, it's like the light outside the circle that doesn't shine into the empty circle. That's the first change. The first change that happens is that the soul that's above creation that's above the body doesn't come down into the body. Ubeis, in the second part, even those parts of your soul which come down into your body, they become physical, they become materialistic. Right? As we said before, is that no longer does the soul that comes down to the body see godliness, it sees what the body filters. It only hears what the body filters. Meaning that the soul itself now becomes changed. It becomes physical, materialistic as the body is. Like the kav, like that line that comes down through into the empty space, and the hiding of Hashem's light in that line, that happens because of the vessels. That once it comes down to the vessels, we said before, it becomes colored like the vessels. It's like light going in through stained glass, where the light still remains simple, right? But no longer is it just simple white light. Now it's red light and blue light and green light and yellow light. It's all these different colors. Why? Because it came down into a vessel, and the light itself becomes colored as the vessel. The same thing, your soul becomes colored as your body. It starts seeing, comprehending, thinking, everything on the terms of your body, and only what your body filters. So that's with the soul coming down into the body. And the same thing is when the concealment of exile, just like we said in the light that transcends the circle, and the light which comes down into the circle, the changes that happen. And the same thing is the soul that remains above the body, and the part of the soul that comes into the body, which they both get changed in their different ways. That the same thing is with the concealment that happens when we go into exile. Both of these things happen when we go down to exile. Like we said before, number one is we can no longer see. That part gets hidden completely. And number two, even what we do even what we can understand, that's in a much, much more limited sense. It also has these two things. Aleph, number one, Master Bisman Hagalos, La Yeshnam Hagiluyim Mikdash. The first thing is that in exile we do not have the revelations of the times of the Beis Hamikdash. It says in Pirkei Avos that 10 miracles were constantly happening in the Beis Hamikdash. We don't see those miracles anymore. So the godliness that was in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we don't see anymore. Since the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we cannot go up and see. We can no longer see godliness. The whole concept of seeing godliness is no longer, we can no longer do in exile. In that sense, it's like the great light which transcends the circle, which never came down into the circle. It's like the seeing of godliness which never came down into exile. We cannot see Hashem at all. And the second change is even our comprehension. In exile, it's not a true comprehension. In other words, again, it's like the part of the soul which comes down into the body, where the seeing it still sees, understanding it still understands, it still hears, but it's a whole different thing. It no longer sees and hears godliness. Now it sees and hears only what goes to the body. And the same thing is our understanding. We still understand godliness, but only which comes through the filters and the channels of exile, meaning a lot lower understanding. And as he says here, it's not even a true understanding of godliness. It's not just because there is no longer the revelations of the Beis Hamikdash. Elagam mitzad hahelim v'hester degolos. This is also because of the concealment of exile. That exile hides on godliness. So not only is it because we no longer see and therefore we can't comprehend as well, but exile itself, it hides godliness to the extent that we can't understand it as well. And that's like the second difference. The second change that happens in the tzimtzum as well as in the neshama coming down below is where the light that comes into the circle gets changed through the tzimtzum. And the same thing is our understanding gets changed because of exile, not just because of all things that are hidden, but because exile itself hides godliness, which makes it that we can't understand Hashem properly. Another, by the way, I guess another example of this is it says in the Shir Amalis that we say before benching, Hayinu kecholmim, we're like dreamers. What happens in a dream? In a dream, two opposites can happen, right? You can be here in America, and then a second later you can be walking in China, and then you can be in a building, and then things just opposites. You can be one place, another place. Opposites can happen one after the next. There's no rhyme or reason. And it says in Golus, the same thing happens: is that we can daven with proper intent and be all into it and everything, and a minute later you finish davening and you're back to and everything. And you think, oh, I didn't daven properly. And the Alter Rebbe says, no, it's not because you didn't daven properly. It's because you're in a dream. We're in a dream-like state. In exile, we're dreaming. And in a dream, opposites can happen. You can have an incredible inspiration of godliness, and a second later, it can be gone because you're in a dream-like state. So that's what he's saying here, is that even what we do understand, even when you have a good understanding of godliness, you had a good davening and everything was okay and everything, it's still not the same like it was in the times of Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because exile by definition is like a dream. Exile by definition hides godliness in the sense that you can no longer, it's impossible to comprehend godliness the way it was when the Beis Hamikdash was here. Like somebody who was sleeping, you cannot understand close to as well as when you were awake. Eino hasaga mitis, it's impossible to have a true understanding of godliness in exile. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. So we still have a few more minutes, so we'll continue. What is it going to continue now? Here comes a very important rule, or what do you call it? A very important idea in Chassidus, and that is, what was the purpose of the tzimtzum? What was the purpose of the tzimtzum? What was the purpose of the contracting the light? Anybody want to pipe in a little bit, get some more interaction? Anybody want to? What's the purpose of the tzimtzum?
Can you hear us, or are we muted?
I can hear you because you're not muted, but everybody else is muted. So if anybody else wants to
Well,
pipe in, just let me know you want me to unmute you.
The tzimtzum is to contract Hashem's light because we couldn't exist if we saw it directly.
Very good. So let's take that a step further. So then what is the that is the you might say the technical thing of it, right? In order for us to exist, he had to contract his light. But what's the purpose of it? Why do you do that?
That maybe the purpose of that light is to light the goodness for Yiddishkeit, to get the emptiness that's in there out of that circle.
Very good. That's where I wanted to go with this. In other words, what are you saying? That the purpose of Tzimtzum is not really to conceal the light. That's not its goal. That's not its purpose. That's what it does. Tzimtzum conceals light. That's the what of it. But what is the why? Why Tzimtzum? What is the purpose of Tzimtzum? Is actually to reveal. The purpose of Tzimtzum is to reveal more. So the whole purpose of Tzimtzum is not to conceal. It's actually to reveal, right? And he's going to say it in all these different things. What's the purpose of our soul coming down into our body? Not to go down, but to go up. Now, technically, it has to go down in order to go up. So that's what it does. But what's the purpose? Why? In order to reveal more. The same thing is why we're going into exile. We've already said this before. The purpose of going into exile is in order to go higher. He says the whole tzimtzum, what's the point? The point of the tzimtzum is to reveal. It works in two different ways, okay? We said the example of before in past classes about a teacher teaching his student. And when a teacher teaches a student, especially like you have an Einstein teaching a kindergarten where the distance between the teacher and student is infinite, so he has to have a lot of tzimtzum in order to get from his understanding to give something to the child that would be understandable by the child, right? He can't tell him something else because then he's not giving him the point. He has to tell him the point, but it has to be connected the lesson that he's teaching, but he has to work very hard to take that, like theory of relativity, to say something to a 5-year-old child, it's a big jump. How do you do that? Well, it takes a lot of tzimtzum to bring theory of relativity into something which is understandable for a 5-year-old. And even that, of course, would be very limited in everything, but a true teacher could do that. And not only that, if he does it properly, then that 5-year-old child, just based on what the teacher told him, if he studies it enough, he one day will be able to reach the understanding of the teacher. Because in that little anecdote is the entire message we'll tie in with Pesach in a second, this idea. But let's get to the point and then we'll go back to Pesach. So we said that the first step the teacher has to do is he has to remove his understanding and then just take a little light and work with that to be able to bring it down to the student. So why did he conceal the light? Why did he remove the light from himself? Why did he remove his understanding of the concept? Is not to conceal, right? He is concealing. He's concealing from himself. He's concealing from others. But that's not why he's doing it. Why he's doing it is in order to reveal. In order that the child should be able to comprehend something, what does he have to do? He has to conceal. He has to conceal in order to reveal to the child. That's just the way you teach. So the concealment, the whole purpose of concealing is in order to reveal. Generally speaking, by the way, we do this all the time. When a parent lowers themselves to a child, bends down to the ground and starts playing with the child, why are you doing it? Why are you concealing your true self? It's not to hide yourself. It's to reveal. It's in order to make a bond with that child. When you teach something to somebody, when you hide what you're really thinking, and you only bring out that which the person should be able to understand through speech, you're doing the same thing. You're hiding in order to reveal. Because in order to reveal anything to anybody, you have to hide. That's the name of the game. Why? Because if you don't hide, then it's too overwhelming. If you just talk the way you think, and you don't think about what the other person or anything, you just babble. That becomes just, nobody can understand what you're saying. And that's why the greatest teacher is the greatest person and able to explain something to the lowest child. King Shlomo, it says, he gave 3,000 parables for everything, which in Chassidus, it says it means that he went 3,000 levels. He was 3,000. We don't mean parables that he was able to give a parable with apples, oranges, tomatoes, and kiwis. It means that he was able to give a parable for each parable. He was able to lower himself 3,000 levels to teach somebody who's 3,000 levels below them. That takes a great mind. That's incredible to be able to do that. To be able to somebody who's so much smarter, to be able to explain it to somebody who's so much lower, that's a real teacher. But in order to do that, you have to conceal. Because in order to reveal, you have to conceal, especially with Hashem. How does he make, like Meir, you said before, how does he create me and you? Well, the only way to do that is if he conceals his light. Because if he just shines, then it would be too overwhelming, too overpowering. So it wouldn't reveal, it would actually conceal. When you give everything, when a teacher just talks without thinking about the child, he's not revealing, he's concealing, even though he didn't conceal. The whole purpose of concealing is in order to reveal afterwards, right? And that's what he says. The whole tzimtzum, why does Hashem conceal his light? Is not because he wants to hide from us. It's not because he doesn't want us to see the light. It's the opposite. He wants it so we should be able to see. We should be able to comprehend. And as well, this goes in two stages. The first stage is, we mentioned before, that child that understands just a little anecdote. And at that point, he has no clue the depth of what that incredible professor had taught him. He only he understands like a 5-year-old child. But over time, the child can learn and learn and learn until he understands just as well as the teacher, and maybe even better than the teacher. Why? Because the teacher gave him that little anecdote. The same, because in that little anecdote is hidden the entire intelligence and ideas of the teacher. He puts it all into that little, very little size anecdote. Same thing is with Hashem. Hashem conceals his light, and he gives us a very, very little bit, a tiny amount that we can understand, that we can relate to, that we can experience. But what happens? So that's the first revelation, that now we can exist and we can think, we can speak, we can exist, we can experience things. But what happens is through Torah mitzvahs and through learning Chassidus and through all these things, what happens? We're able to go back to the original source. And when we get back to it, we could understand the way it was before, all the way up to before the concealment, and even get a greater understanding than before the concealment. Yerida Tzedach Aliyah, we're now us with our physical capabilities, our physical minds, our physical eyes, and our physical channels. We could understand Hashem greater and better than before the Tzimtzum. Why did that all happen? Because Hashem lowered his light to just a drop that we could experience, but then we made our way back up. We learned and we went and we drew and we climbed up that rope, and we climbed back up all the way to the original existence where we could understand even better than it was before. That's Yerida Tzedach Aliyah, Tzimtzum B'Shvil HaGilui. The whole Tzimtzum was in order to be able to understand better. But the only way to do that is if you have a tzimtzum. If Hashem conceals, then we can understand better. And we said again, 2 ways. Number one is to experience at all, to actually be able to exist. So Hashem has lower light that should exist. That's the first revelation. He reveals it to my level. And the second one is that I can build myself all the way back, that we can understand the way higher than it was before the tzimtzum. And essentially, that's what will happen when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, that second thing will happen. Where now, because of all the work that we did in Galus, in exile, to prepare for Mashiach, we'll be able to comprehend and see godliness even better, even greater than it was before. Because the tzimtzum was in order to reveal that me and you in our physical bodies should be able to comprehend godliness greater and better than it was before the tzimtzum. That's what Mashiach is going to accomplish. That's quite amazing to think about, that with our physical bodies and our physical eyes, we'll be able to understand and comprehend godliness greater than the tzimtzum. That's incredible. And that's what the Maimer is going to continue explaining as we go on.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, I'm waiting for questions.
I've had a thought. You're in that circle, and you got that little bit of light. Maybe the idea of doing the mitzvahs, doing different things to get up and outside that circle is a reason why we light Shabbos candles, why we do Hanukkah candles, that light that maybe elevates us towards that outer circle.
Very good. But essentially any mitzvah, correct. That's
Yeah,
very correct.
But if we're using what we
Light as
understand
example,
as
correct.
light,
The Rebbe says actually talking about Hanukkah candles in a sense is the most powerful of this all. Why?
right?
Because Hanukkah candles we light at nighttime, and in order to get rid of darkness. So in a sense, Hanukkah candles are the most powerful to accomplish this. Because yes, what it does is it brings light into the circle. But what you're essentially is you're not trying to get back out of the circle. What you're trying to do is in the circle now, you're revealing that there is that
Correct.
all that light that was hidden originally is really all there. It never really disappeared. It's really all there. And not only that, it's even deeper than what was before. And we're revealing all that inside the circle. That's really what our purpose is that no longer will the circle be empty of light, but we will refill it with the light that was there and even greater light. And yes, through Hanukkah candles and through mitzvahs,
Well,
and
when
study, that's what
when
we
you're
do.
when you're doing Hanukkah candles, you're doing the mitzvah of the miracles, doing Shabbos candles, the miracle of Shabbos. It's that that's what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah. But again, like I said, but every mitzvah to a certain extent does that as well. Yeah, very good. I said we can tie a little bit with Pesach is coming up, tie a little bit with matzah. This idea, right, that you give a child a little anecdote, but in that anecdote is revealed everything. So I think a great way to understand that is it says that what's the spiritual significance of matzah? I hope you don't hear all that noise. What's the spiritual significance of matzah? Right. So it says in the Talmud that a child cannot say Abba. A child can't say father until they taste the taste of grain. So a toddler, right, or a baby. So the first year of their life, they can't say anything. When they start saying Abba, when they start saying father, is only when they taste the taste of grain. That's what it says in the Talmud. That grain, wheat, has a special relevance to seichel, to intelligence, where they're able to articulate and say it, right? Because really, a child can understand a lot even before he's able to say stuff. We see that, right? They understand a lot before they're able to actually talk. But in order to talk, this idea of saying Abba, they only do it when they taste bread. And it says that matzah has the same spiritual significance. That a child, as the Jewish people, as children, we weren't able to say Abba, our Father in heaven, until we ate matzah. When we went out of Egypt, we were born. It was our birth. And matzah is what enabled us to say Abba, Father in heaven. And that's why it says in Zohar, in Kabbalah, that matzah is michla de mehemnusa. Matzah is the bread of faith. When we eat matzah, we feed ourselves faith. Because we cannot say Abba, we can't say Father. That faith that we have in Hashem cannot happen until we eat matzah. And that's why eating matzah is such an important thing. That once there's a story that somebody else came to the Rebbe and said he wants to give to something big. He wants to give a lot of money to something big. And the Rebbe said, in Israel, they're distributing matzah. I think you should sponsor distributing more matzah to more Jews. And the guy says, no. I mean like something lasting, like a big building or something substantial. And the Rebbe responded, if you're asking me, so in my opinion, something big is more Jews eating matzah is big. And I think part of it is because what the Rebbe is saying is that a Jew without matzah, there's something critical missing. He's missing a deeper faith in Hashem. It's the most basic of who we are, that believe in Hashem. We all believe. We have to feed that faith. And the way to feed it is through matzah. Every Jew eating matzah on Pesach is making them believe in Hashem more. You can't take that away from a Jew. If you want something big, give a Jew matzah to eat. That's what matzah is. It feeds faith. So here it says like this in Chassidus. When that child says Abba, when he says father for that first time, does he have any clue what it means to be a father? Does he have any clue what a father is and what makes this guy his father and why this guy's a father, not somebody else's father? He has no clue, right? He has no idea of anything of what a father means, what a father is. But at the same time, when he says, Abba, this is my father, he's saying everything. He got the point. And everything that he's going to learn later in his life about what a father is just understanding what he originally knew better. He's not going to learn anything new anymore. All he's going to learn now is what a father means, what a father is, and everything like that. But the essence of it is he's already got. He knows what it is. He knows this is his father. That's the point. He's gotten the point. Everything else is just commentary. And the same thing is this idea is that when you get the point, you can be like a child understanding that this guy is your father, but having no clue at all. But as you grow and you mature and you learn about that point, you can get deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to the very essence. Why? Because in that Abba, in that father is everything. All the explanations, all the understanding of it, the reasoning and everything is all in that one word Abba. It's all there. It's just you have to bring it out. You have to reveal it. And that's what maturity means, is you learn it more, and you learn it more. And the same thing of good teacher, as you went going back to that point, when he gives that little anecdote to that student, the student, if he studies that little anecdote, he can go back to get the original point. As time goes on, he learns it more and more. As it says, after 40 years, we understand the teacher. It takes 40 years to do that, to get back to the original point. And 40 years of really intense study, I'm assuming, right? But it takes 40 years because in what the teacher told you 40 years ago, it's all hidden in there. It's all there. So let's finish with one more thought. Here we are. We're learning about Mashiach. We're learning about our preparation for Mashiach. We're learning about how important it is, our preparation now. In the last part of the Maimer, we learned how it's important it is to keep on doing Torah and mitzvahs, no matter what the hardships are, no matter what comes our way. Here comes Pesach, to eat matzah, do the 4 cups of wine, just like any other year, even if it might be alone, it might be with family and everything. That's number one. And number two is also to recognize it's all tzimtzum. All this is only for a revelation. This is not because Hashem wants to hide from us. It's not because Hashem wants to conceal and torture us and much us, as they would say in Yiddish. It's all for the revelation. It's all because Hashem is giving us a greater light at the end of the tunnel. And what he says at the end of this Maimer is, and that's why we should learn a lot of Chassidus. We should learn a lot of Chassidus in order to get us a little closer to that. Let us appreciate that a little more. To appreciate that everything that's going on is Tzimtzum B'Shvil HaGilui. It's Yerida Tzedach Aliyah. The concealment is for the revelation. It's lowering in order to go back up higher. And that's really, even talking about today's Yud Alf Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday, is it's over 25 years ago. That the Rebbe had passed away, right? So the Rebbe lives on in everything. But it's still, it's not the same when you're able to see and feel and comprehend and everything. To remember is that's all you did at Tzedach Aliyah. We're maturing. We're getting better at something somehow. If we see it or we don't see it. This is all in order to get better, greater, and a bigger revelation. And recognize is that all what we're doing today, what my actions and your actions and everything that we're doing, the mitzvahs that we're doing, the Torah that we're learning, the Chassidus that we're learning, is all enabling and all preparing us, ourselves, and the world for, as you said, the corona, not for the coronavirus, not for the crown of virus, but for the crown of Hashem, the crown of Mashiach. That we should all, with the Rebbe's birthday and Pesach coming up, that we should merit, that we should go out of this galus, we should leave this exile and be together with the Rebbe, be together with Mashiach, be together with Hashem, with the coming of Mashiach.
Amen.
Amen.
Any more questions before we close up? Comments, thoughts?
Just a thought. Just realize that this year for Pesach, every Yid is going to have to be at home.
Yeah.
To do a Seder, or even if they never did a Seder, but they're going to be at home and probably will have to do something.
Yeah.
Where there's many that over the years probably never even did a Seder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they're being forced by an outside situation to be at home.
Yeah.
Just it's funny, if you sit and you analyze things, if you try to analyze the good out of a bad situation, it's amazing what you can come up with. It seems to all come back to one central point.
Yeah.
So it's like I said to a couple of people here, in the last 2-3 weeks, Jews that don't keep Shabbos basically have had to keep Shabbos. Shabbos is much more than they've never done before. Not going to a store, not having to go here, not going there. They've had to kind of stay at home. It's whether they davened or not is immaterial. They did something.
Yeah. It says we keep just one Shabbos or 2 Shabbos, then Mashiach is going to come. So that's also a good thing.
Well, it's interesting. I said to a couple of people during the week, I says, so how did you enjoy keeping Shabbos? Says, what do you mean? I said, did you go shopping? No. Oh, so it's a start.
There you go.
So
There's
anyway,
a story, by the way, of the Rebbe. There's a girl that was trying to get married and nothing was working. She was not getting engaged. So the parents came to the Rebbe for a blessing. And the Rebbe said, if you keep Shabbos, I promise, if you keep Shabbos, you'll get engaged. Anyway, they weren't interested. They lived in Newark, New Jersey, and had a store there, and the busiest day was Shabbos, so they weren't willing to close shop. Anyway, so time went on. Anyway, years later was the riots, right? The Newark riots, and their shop was burnt down. So it was the first Shabbos that their shop was closed. About a month later, a few weeks later, their daughter got engaged.
Well,
So I guess God and it's a sad thing to say, but that's what it seems like. More Jews are like you're right. More Jews are keeping Shabbos.
there's an expression: you have to keep the faith.
Yeah.
If you just let yourself go and just leave it to a higher being to guide you, you'd be surprised at how far you can go.
Yeah.
Amen.
Oh,
So
very good.
with that, I'm going to reveal myself to my wife and help her continue cleaning for Pesach.
There you go. Bring it right into action.
How's that? Because last year I spent it at Chaim, so I didn't have to do that. But this year it's a different story.
All right.
Okay, so are you doing this
Tuesday morning, Meretz Hashem. I guess we'll keep it up.
Tuesday morning?
No, no.
Tuesday morning. That's the plan. That's what we started doing, right? Sunday,
Yeah,
Tuesday, Thursday.
Tuesday, yeah. Do Tuesday. Tuesday will be good.
7 o'clock.
Yeah,
is the plan,
well,
and then of course Thursday is not going to be possible.
Right.
At least not on Zoom. And then next week, what Tuesday's Yom Tov already?
No, no, yeah,
Tuesday's Erev Yom Tov.
no, Erev Yom Tov, Tuesday night. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that Sunday and Tuesday we can do it again. I'll put out on
Okay.
the what's name and continue learning the mimer. We don't have to stop.
Okay.
I don't think because
Okay.
of Pesach.
Okay.
All right. Very well.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yes.
Have a
You
great
too.
day, sir.
Yashkayach, thank you.
Yeah.
Rebbe, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.